and welcome to the Naples chapter's October 2021 meeting, and also kicking off celebrations for Florida Native Plant Month all October long. We're celebrating extra hard the Florida native plants that we all love. So, after some meeting announcements where we'll talk about some activities that you can participate in to celebrate Florida Native Plant Month, we will have tonight's very special feature presentation by our very own Connie Nagle about discovering the differences between native plant lookalikes, a very important topic. Having trouble with the slides tonight. And my name is Andy Nacarado. I am the president of the Naples chapter, the Zoom host for this evening. And we also are joined by our treasurer, Becky Troop, our co-conservation chair, Wade Gurley, and our YouTube manager, Danny Cox, will be putting some links into the chat over the course of these announcements. So you'll be able to click on the link and learn more about what I'm talking about in these slides. And I touched on the Zoom housekeeping already, and thank you for your cooperation. If at any time you do have a question, feel free to type it into the chat. And after the feature presentation, Connie's presentation has concluded, we'll address as many of your questions as we can at the end. And a recording of this presentation will be made available on our website and our YouTube channel, where we do set up those recordings to have subtitles in multiple different languages. So it's a good way to share these educational presentations with anybody. Okay, so we have a very exciting members field trip coming up this Saturday, October 9th at Collier Seminole State Park. We'll be meeting at 9 o'clock, and there will be 2 different guided walk options to help us get to know the park, get to know the native plants there, and celebrate Florida Native Plant Month. There is either a full trail hike, just under a mile, with Park Services Specialist Henry Gonzalez. So he is a staff member of Collier Seminole State Park. Or there is a slower paced sensory experience with Heather Gienap, who is a local environmental educator. And if you joined us for our meeting a few months ago, Heather presented about native plant ethnobotany. And we do have a limited participation on this field trip. It will max out at 20 participants, and we will be splitting up 10 people and 10 people with the 2 different guided walk experiences. Participants will receive free entry to Collier Seminole State Park. So that's a nice perk of being a member of the Florida Native Plant Society. And we do still have room in this field trip. So if you are interested in joining us, there will be a link to sign up in the chat. And if you're not yet a member of the Naples chapter in the Florida Native Plant Society, you can join today. Starts at just $35 per year for a regular membership. And then you'll be all set to join us on our members field trip to Collier Seminole State Park this Saturday. Another way that we're celebrating Florida Native Plant Month is by offering a native plant sale at Naples Botanical Garden on Saturday, October 23rd. That will be between 9 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. We will be set up towards the south end of the garden's main parking lot. So that means admission to the garden is not required to visit our native plant sale, But of course, we do encourage you to plan a visit to Naples Botanical Garden, if not on the same day, then someday soon. There are a lot of Florida native plants incorporated in the garden's collections, not just in the Florida garden, but also in the Caribbean garden and scattered around even as you drive in on your way to the main parking lot. You'll see a lot of native landscaping between the entrance and the parking lot. And we are looking for volunteers to help us set up for the native plant sale, help customers find the right native plants for them, or even if you just want to help us move plants to customers' cars after they purchase them. There's a lot of different ways that you can help, and it's a good way to learn more about native plants. I hope we'll see a lot of you there, October 23rd, Naples Botanical Garden parking lot. Another fun thing that was launched this month is a special Naturalist project that was created by our co-conservation chair, Wade Gurley. And Wade, are you with us this evening?
I am. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. So apologies, I had a meeting for work that ran late and I'm calling in from my car, from the phone in my car. So if my service cuts out, I apologize. Andy, just cut me off if you need to. So yeah, this project came about. We were talking many months ago about pollinators and a pollinator project in Southwest Florida. And one of the kind of deliverables from that concept was what's called a bloom phenology chart. So it's basically just a collection of data that would inform us about the timing of bloom of native plant species in our area. So we were thinking, how best to do this? How could we collect data to create this awesome tool that we would be able to use? And one of our first thoughts was iNaturalist. So for those of you who aren't familiar, iNaturalist is a program through, I believe, National Audubon Society or the Smithsonian that collects, it's basically a community science project where anybody can go out and collect data, make observations, and put it into this gigantic database that's usable by scientists and researchers the world over. So if you go into iNaturalist, in addition to having this awesome capability of collecting data for citizen science, it makes a really great tool that you can download on your mobile phone to help with plant or animal identification. I use it a lot if I come across caterpillars or bugs that I don't know the name of. You basically can just take a picture with your phone and iNaturalist will make suggestions about what species it thinks it is, and then you can look at those suggestions, make a suggestion, and then other professionals in the field can actually go in and comment on your suggestions and tell you basically what it is that you've seen. So it's really helpful in that manner. But so in addition to that, it helps us create this huge database that we can draw from to basically know what plants are growing and blooming in our backyard and know what time of year they're growing. So yeah, Andy sent out a couple of great links to how-to videos. For whether you use Apple or Android products, you can download the app on your mobile phone and just take your mobile phone with you the next time you're on a hike and just snap pictures. And once you join your project, it automatically, all observations that you make will automatically upload to our project database. And then at the end of the month, we'll be able to go in and look and see who all's participated. We'll be able to get a better idea of what plants are being seen. And then the great thing about this is our goal is to run this for a full year and collect that data. And then we'll have a better idea within a year time span annually what plants are blooming and when. So yeah, if there's any questions, I will try to hang on and maybe can answer some at the end of I can jump on maybe at the end. I'll be at a safe spot to stop then. But yeah, just moving forward, we recommend that you join the project. It's a great way just to have fun and, on a hike, if you're out hiking, if you're going to the grocery store and see a native plant, we ask that you do try to take pictures of plants in nature. So it's not a garden it's not designed to take pictures of your garden or a plant that's been planted by you or somebody that you know. So it's more of a wild area inventory. And also we ask you try to take pictures of plants that are in flower. That's the big goal of this project. So you can take pictures of anything. It'll ID the leaves of trees sometime. So that's great information to have. But for this project, we are asking that you try to incorporate pictures of flowering plants. Yeah. Again, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer at the end of the program. And yeah, Andy, anything else you want me to cover before I turn it off for the moment?
Thank you, Wade. That was excellent. I was just going to show that if you join iNaturalist on desktop, you would click on Community, and it's a drop down, and it'll show you projects as one of the options under Community. And if you search for Naples native plants, then our project will come up and you'll be able to join. And I must admit that some of my plant photos in iNaturalist are from my yard that I have planted from native plant nurseries, but there is an option to specify that it's a cultivated plant. And you can see that I use it on my phone most of the time, but it's really easy to just say cultivated, yes or no. So I would recommend that if you are including photos from native plants that you have planted.
And we'll be able to parse that out when we do the data collection at the end of or when we collect data for the project.
Okay. Excellent. And I encourage everybody to join our iNaturalist project. And if you have any questions, maybe you're brand new to iNaturalist, email us at naplesnativeplants@fnps.org, and we will be happy to help you out. Thanks again, Wade. So excited about this. Okay, Wade and I are also partnering together to develop a virtual trivia night towards the end of the month. So this is a bonus Zoom gathering. It'll be Wednesday, October 27th at 6 o'clock. So it'll be similar to signing up and joining our chapter meetings on Zoom, but this time it'll be focused on native plant trivia. So you can show off what you've learned about native plants throughout Florida Native Plant Month. I think I'm going to hit a record for saying Florida native plant in tonight's meeting. In addition, we'll be talking about some of the highlights of the iNaturalist Project observations that have been made over the course of the month. And one lucky participant during the virtual trivia night will win one free tour for up to 6 people at the Gore Nature Education Center. Their grand opening is coming up in early November. So if you would like your chance to win a free private tour of this wonderful newly renovated education center in Golden Gate Estates, please do register for the virtual trivia night on Zoom. Hope to see you all there as well. And now I would like to turn it over to the lead of the nominating committee, Becky Troop.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to see that we have a lot of people participating in tonight's Zoom meeting. Myself, Karen Allman, and Linda Wineland are the nominating committee for this year's elections. And so we have reached out and contacted a few people to see if they would be interested in serving on our board of directors, but we do not have to reach out. You can reach out back to us, and we will then have you complete a questionnaire about why you would like to be on our board, and Karen and Linda and I will discuss all of the wonderful things, attributes that each of you have, and which board position you would be best suited for. The all of this, of course, has to turn around pretty fast. October 15th, we need to have all of the nominations in, and we will be, the committee will be reviewing the applications. And then for the November newsletter, the recommended slate will be presented. And in December at our Zoom meeting, well, I don't know if it'll be a Zoom meeting, but at our whatever our meeting is in December, we'll have elections. So you can, if you're interested in a board position, or you just want to talk to me, because I'm fun to talk to, you can email the Naples Native Plants at fnps.org, and I'll respond, or Karen or Linda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Becky. And as Becky said, we do our annual board elections in December, and we'll announce the slate of nominees in our next newsletter coming out for November. And so that just gives you a little bit of an idea of our timeline and why we're seeking your nominations by October 15th. And you can see on the slide here the different opportunities. There's 4 officer positions as well as a variety of director positions. And also, as Becky said, if you have any questions about what it's like serving on the board for the Naples chapter, send us an email and we'll be happy to chat with you. And I have to say, it's been a pretty good group. We've been doing a lot of great activities and projects, and I really feel like we're making a difference in Collier County and educating and preserving our native plants. And at this time, I would like to recognize the business members of the Naples chapter. We have 2 new business members who have joined us recently. That is BB Florida Friendly and Lander Landscape Design. So thank you both for joining at the business member level. We very much appreciate your support. And our 2 other business members who've been with us a little bit longer, of course, Naples Botanical Garden and Cypress Cove Landkeepers, who's responsible for the preservation and renovation of the Gore Nature Education Center. So part of Florida Native Plant Month has to do with increasing awareness in our community about native plants and their importance. And you've probably heard by now that there is a new specialty license plate, the Florida Native License Plate. You can see the sample and the artwork here. And purchase of this specialty plate does support the Florida Native Plant Society. And if you're interested in pre-ordering one of these specialty plates, you can click on the link that's coming into the chat or visit our website at fnpsnaples.org. And with any new specialty plate, they need to reach 3,000 pre-orders before the plate will be manufactured and distributed. So we're still in that initial phase of reaching the 3,000 pre-orders. And if you would like to participate, please click the link or visit our website. We're coming to the end of our announcements for tonight. Here's a list of some dates to put in your calendar. Our next chapter meeting will be virtual. In fact, through the end of this year, our chapter meetings will all be virtual on Zoom. We'll be reassessing in January. That's one of the months where we take a break from having chapter meetings. So there will be no meeting of any kind in January, but that's when the board will reassess about virtual, hybrid, in person, for the 2022 programs. But put in your calendars for Wednesday, November 3rd, 6 o'clock will be our next chapter meeting. Our guest speaker will be Becky Spear from the Naples Preserve. She's done an excellent job with manual restoration of pine flatwoods and scrub habitat at the Naples Preserve. And especially for anyone who has some slash pine or saw palmetto on their property, you could learn some interesting techniques for restoration or keeping your pine flatwood habitat healthy. Then also very exciting, and I mentioned earlier, the grand opening for the Gore Nature Education Center is coming up on Sunday, November 7th, and you can learn more about the Gore Nature Education Center and the Cypress Cove Landkeepers and what to expect at the grand opening on their website, which should be popping into the chat as well. Finally, in mid-November, so Saturday the 13th and Sunday the 14th, mark your calendars for the Naples Yard and Garden Show. The Naples chapter expects to be there selling native plants, but there are lots of other plant vendors that participate. And it's located at the Collier County Extension Office, which is near the Collier County Fairgrounds on your way out to Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary off of Immokalee Road. You can also visit our website to see some future dates that we already have planned through the end of the year at fnpsnaples.org. And just a reminder, if you're not yet receiving our e-newsletter, you can visit our website to sign up. And it's generally a monthly newsletter that gives you a heads up about the activities that are coming up over the next month. And you can also come to our website to join the Florida Native Plant Society if you are not yet a member. Always happy to get new members. Well, thank you all for listening to all those exciting announcements. And I hope you got a couple of ideas for things you could do to celebrate Florida Native Plant Month. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our featured presenter for this evening, Connie Nagle. And going to, oops, didn't mean to do that quite so soon. I am going to read Connie's introduction. Connie Nagle is the membership chair for the Naples chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. She describes herself as a very curious person with many passions. Connie strives to create thoughtful, sustainable outdoor spaces that support a rich and diverse environment for people, plants, pollinators, and other insects. Butterflies are her special joy. Connie has created a volunteer garden program for the Collier County Parks Department. Her teams of volunteers maintain 3 Collier Park pollinator gardens and 1 nature trail. The program recently adopted biannual butterfly counts to learn about and promote the butterfly diversity within the parks and to contribute data to the scientific community. Professionally, Connie is a small business consultant specializing in back office organization and building teams. She also enjoys hiking, kayaking, and fishing in Florida's natural areas. Connie, I turn it over to you. Can't wait to hear your presentation tonight. And you're muted.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yes.
There we go. And I'm just going to jump right in here. Andy, thank you very much for the introduction. And
My pleasure.
it is my pleasure to do this presentation tonight. Ever since I've joined the Naples Native Plant Society, which has only been a couple years, I have been on a journey to learn more about native plants. And with more than 2,800 plants in Florida, and just, I mean, 28 native plants in Florida, this has really been a challenge. So please join me tonight as we explore just a few of the native plants and discover some differences. We'll start with a little bit about me, talk about why knowing matters. We'll dig into the garden for some lookalikes, and then we'll finish up with a question and answer session. I'm just going to get rid of a couple things here on my screen. First, about me, as Andy said, I love to explore and connect with the nature, and I find gardening to be the fastest way to connect with nature and wildlife, whether that's through some projects with the Native Plant Society or with Parks and Rec's garden program. I am committed to making a difference in my community through the use of plants and butterflies. So as you will see, tonight's presentation is going to be slightly biased for plants for the pollinator habitats. Why knowing the differences matter. As native plant members, we have an innate desire to learn about plants, and our mission is all about sharing our passion and educating others. So we should really know this stuff, and I don't. So I thought the best way to learn was to pick a few plants and focus on exploring their differences. Most of us are involved in some project that are about creating or maintaining sustainable local environments. And we usually end up having conversations about native and non-native plants with the public. So here in my presentation tonight, I'm taking the approach of learning the differences visually. And as I'm learning, it is much more reliable to identify plants by sight. This makes it easier to share knowledge, especially for volunteers and the general public. And I believe that the Naples Native Plant Society, we have a special responsibility to visually learn the differences and find ways to help others learn about plants. When I started researching, the first thing that tripped me up was labeling and photo mistakes that I was finding. And I'm sure it's not on purpose, but it still happens and it adds to the confusion. And here I just have a couple of examples that I found. The first one is the firebush, which is featured in the recent book, The Native Plants for Florida Gardens. And that was just recently released, I believe in 2020. And this was the publisher's fault. However, it's still out there and it won't be corrected until the next issue. The second post that I found was actually on Facebook, and this was by the University of Florida's Volusia County Extension Office. And they're talking about the native porterweed here. And as we will see later, that the picture that they have associated here is the non-native. So again, this does create confusion, not only for myself, but I'm sure for other people also. And now I can recognize that these are mistakes, but as you will see, that's not always the case. And tonight, as I explore a couple of other different plants, it got hard and it got difficult, and I had to ask for some help along the way. I'm going to get started here by jumping in with a couple of plants that are readily available from the common garden areas, the nurseries, the big box stores, and they're often mislabeled. And at first glance, they're kind of easy to get wrong. So we're going to first look at the porterweed, and then we'll look at the firebush afterwards. And I forgot to mention, I am going to try some pronunciations here with the scientific names, but this is still something I am learning, and it is difficult. So please forgive me when I butcher these names a little bit along the way. Anyway, with the porterweed, there are 65 species of the Stachys starfeta family, and only one species is native to Florida. and that's the Jamaicensis. And in the non-native category, I'm just going to talk briefly here about 3 different species. These are the ones that are most readily available in the Florida market. The native variety, as we all know, is kind of low to the ground and sprawling. It's wider than tall, and the non-native is the one that will grow tall, and it has a very distinct central stem. For scale here, I can demonstrate that best with the non-native. That's a plant ID sign. And as you can see, it's not much taller than that. And I would say that sign's probably 12 inches at the most, 8 inches, 18 inches tall. On the other side, this is a porterweed that we have growing out at North Collier Regional Park. And that's my arm at shoulder height. And that plant is taller than I am. And this was taken about 4 weeks ago, and it is now much taller than that. When we look at the stem and the growth, you'll notice that the native is more horizontal and the non-native is growing in a more vertical format. We can begin to look at the individual leaves and again be able to distinguish differences there. The non-native is more oval, and it is has raised areas between the veins, whereas the non-native, or I'm sorry, excuse me, the native is oblong and there are no raised areas between the veins. Now, if we were in person, my thought or my plan was to be passing around these plants and everybody be able to touch them and feel them and look at them. And since obviously we're not able to do that, I decided to ask a couple of my friends to help me out. Besides, I've been thinking you can't really have a journey without friends. And for me, the best part of this was making a blooper reel for me and my friends. I'm going to play videos here a couple times through the night, so just bear with me to get them. Whoops, I went too far. Set up. I got to click there. How about now?
I think this is going to work.
We're now looking at the porterweed, and you have a native and a non-native. And based on what you have in your hands, you should be able to tell the difference between the two. One is going to be low, sprawling. If you were to just lay this down, you can see that the plants, the leaves are kind of growing this way and not growing up.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at how that's growing along the ground.
Like lays
Right.
down versus our.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's this
Yeah.
one stacks.
Yep.
Okay.
And then if you take a look at the leaves, you should be able to see a difference in the leaves.
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at the leaves, and what do you see for differences?
Well, I see one is oval with raised edges between the veins.
Which one is oval with raised?
This one, right? Yes. And this one is oblong with no raised areas.
Right.
Look at the back of the leaf, the veins. Yeah, very.
Oh, yeah, you can see more of the
The raised.
texture on the non-native. So that would be the differences between the two. And the non-native, which you're holding handed, that one can grow from 4 to 5 feet tall and even taller. As you can see in one of the photos here, this is one that we have growing out at North Collier, and that's me with my arm out at shoulder height.
Wow.
And that is still growing taller than I am. This one here that you have, this one will just go, I think it says what does it say?
Just sprawling,
Just sprawling. Okay.
wider than tall.
Yeah.
Now, Connie, I have porterweed in my yard, and when I had in one location, it got really tall. I had to cut it back all the time. But then I bought another porterweed that's native, and now it's growing like you're talking about, but it's in the shade. Does it make a difference how they respond? the shade versus sun?
No, dough will grow in both conditions and it will still continue to stay sprawling, whether it's in the shade or in the sun. This one is always going to grow taller than wider, and it will require more pruning
Right.
than the native.
I very much prefer this one in my garden.
Okay, let's see if I can get us back to the,
That video was a great review.
okay, are we back
Reinforce the info.
on, okay, are we back on the slideshow?
Yes, we are.
Okay, awesome. Well, you don't need to see my reminders. Okay. Our next stop is the firebush, the Amelia genus, which consists of 16 species. And in this case, variety name is extremely helpful. However, as we saw earlier, plants get mislabeled. And in the case of firebush plantings, native and non-natives grown in the same area can result in hybrids, which adds to the confusion. And I'm sure this is what led Roger Hammer to write the article for the Fan entitled The Amelia Mess. And I believe Andy will put a link up for that. And that's where I got most of my information on firebush. We're going to talk about just 3 of the non-natives, and that's going to be the Galabra, which means without hairs. The variety Cupra means copper color. And then the last one, Compacta, is actually a cultivar trademarked by All Native in Fort Myers, but it is not a native. So don't let the nursery name confuse you here. That is still considered a non-native. I have bolded a few of the differences that I feel that are pretty reliable when it comes to talking about the firebush. However, even knowing that and looking at firebush together, it's been difficult to tell them apart. The leaf structure on the native variety is generally going to be growing in groups of 3 on the stem. The underside of the leaves are going to be red veins with a little bit of red margins, and the leaves will be hairy, and part of the stems will also be hairy. The biggest difference, I think that's probably the easiest, but I'm not sure it's exactly reliable, is the bloom color. On the native variety, it tends to be darker orange to red, versus the non-native. When we look at some of the features on it, the leaves on the other side are green with white veins, and the leaves are more smooth and have a glossy leaf to them. The blooms run from pale orange to yellow. And here I have another video, and we will see what we learn here by looking, working with Hannah and Hattie.
Today we're going to look at the firebush, and
Are you
I
seeing
have
that?
here for you 3 different samples, and one of them I know.
Yes, we got it.
I
Okay.
purchased it as native, so. And then the other 2, we know one is non-native, and if we look at our information here, we should be able to pick out the non-native pretty easily. And what would be the best clue to pick that out with?
I think the leaves are the easiest. It says
Right.
leaves in groups of 3. So is this 3, how it grows out? It looks like 5 right here though. What is that?
That's a group of 3. You want to look at not the tips of the new growth, you want to look at kind of the older growth.
Older growth.
And like this one here, you can see that there's 3 leaves. These are stems coming out.
Oh, so
But
but you're
it's-
looking really at the main.
Yeah.
Okay, 3. Well, I have 4 here. I have
Right.
4 there. So
Right.
I'm getting stocks of 4.
Correct.
4. Okay,
Okay.
leaves of 4.
Leaves are 4.
Pieces of
And then-
3.
Yeah, and then the other big clue would be the color here. If you look at, this one is not in bloom,
Mhm.
but you'll see that this is yellow, more yellow than red.
orange.
Right.
So that's another clue that it's non-native.
Orange to yellow.
What about the sheen on the leaf? Does that make a difference?
That makes a big difference. If you feel this leaf and then feel that leaf.
It's just like super like textured.
Oh, big
Matte.
difference. Big difference.
And if you look on the back side of the leaf,
It's been super shiny though.
Yeah. Good.
and
your
then
stems
look
are all
at
red.
it under the magnifying glass.
Yes.
Do you see hairs on there? Can you see
Oh,
hairs?
that's what I'm looking for? Oh my God, how big? No, it's big fun. Okay. Oh, I see. You get little hairs, like
Little hairs,
little.
yes. Little tiny hairs.
Okay.
May I look at that one?
Sure. Oh, okay.
And you notice the stem color? If you look at the stems,
Red, green.
Oh, what a difference.
yeah.
Yeah, look at the difference between them.
So this is the non-native,
Right.
because this is the 4 leaves and glossy leaves.
Yep.
And the flowers.
Now, I noticed up here coming out, the new leaves are red.
Reddish, right?
Are they like that on the non-native?
Like yellow.
Okay.
There's a little, this one has a little bit of red in there, but not very much. You're gonna see it in the native. Now this one here is a little bit different and a little bit more interesting.
Oh,
Huh. Is this a native?
I guess we gotta figure that one out. I say native. With leaves, groups of 3. We have a, is it hairy? It's hairy. The leaves are matte. They have that same like rough.
I think it's native.
Okay, that's what we think, but we also think it might be actually a hybrid of the two.
Oh,
Um,
the flowers
the
are
flowers.
different.
Right, the flowers are different. But in the tree itself, located out here in the garden, it just looks a little bit different than the native one sitting here. So we think, and when you put non-native and native firebush in the same area, they can hybridize,
Okay.
self-hybridize.
Oh,
So
Interesting.
this one is just, it's a little bit different.
the leaves are a lighter green,
Right.
but the veins on the back of the leaf
Or still the
are
pink.
still pink, they're
Right.
reddish.
Yeah, it's continue to look a lot alike.
Oh, now, if I looked at this plant in my yard without the reference to the
Right.
native, I would think this would be a native.
Right.
But when you put them side by side, the one you purchase is totally
Yeah.
different from this.
Yeah.
This native.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting.
So we think that that's a hybrid, but we can't be sure of that. It could be a native and just, again, it
So
could be,
different color.
yeah. Okay. I have to admit that playing around and looking into the firebush Amelia was much harder than I thought it was going to be. And I just still, to this day, I'm not 100% confident in my ability to identify the two. I've included here on the non-native a size reference. Again, that's my arm at shoulder height. And this is a plant that's growing at North Collier Regional. And we've already pruned it twice this year, and we'll have another prune going on it here soon. This is a look at the leaves structure. And on the native, you can see that it is growing in groups of 3. And on the non-native, it is growing in groups of 4. If we look at the blossoms, the native is going again run from red to orange versus the non-native is going to be orange to yellow. And this is a close-up of the backside of the leaves, and the native, you can definitely see the red vein. And if you look really closely, you can see the hairs on the veins. The
non-native will be these white veined leaves. Now, finally, it's your turn to play along here. And if you want, you can answer these questions in the chat room. I'm going to put up a couple of 4 photos here, one at a time, and ask you to identify whether it's a native or a non-native. And we'll start with number 1. And Andy, if you could just call out answers on that, that would be great.
I can
So
do
this
that.
is our number 1 picture. And is this native or non-native?
We have our first brave answer says native, another native, a third native, and a fourth is non-native.
And I'm going to tend to agree with the 4th. At the most, we believe this to be the hybrid. This is the one that's we have several of these at the Sugden Butterfly Garden. And they tend to have a little bit of the reddish tint to them, but they don't have the hairy backside. So, and the blooms on these are definitely more to the orange and yellow color. Number 2. This one should be pretty easy to identify, but I've given this clue several times.
Got a couple votes for native for number 2.
Whoops.
Lots of natives coming in. And we're answering for number 2 right now, Connie?
Yes, we are. Yep, I put number 3 up a little fast. But yes, I agree. Number 2 is definitely a native. And number 3, this one should also be easy to identify based on the clues that we've learned.
Okay, so what do we think about number 3? Like maybe we have a vote for non-native, 3 votes for native, another non-native. Getting harder to tell.
Well, I'm going to give you another clue then. Look in the background. What color are the stems? And if you kind of look closely on the edges of this leaf, you can see some hair, and this the blossoms look like they're going to be more on the red side.
Got another couple votes for native.
And that's what we're going with. We're calling number 3 a native. And number 4 here. This one should be easy to identify just by the blossom color itself. And then if you look in the leaves, you should be able to pick up some features on the leaves.
Got an all non-native so far for number 4.
Yes, I would agree with that. And it seems to me, in learning and playing around in here, is the non-native is pretty easy to identify. It's the hybrids and the native that seems a little bit harder to distinguish. And it may be just for my part in that I don't have 100% proof that I have native in any of the 3 gardens that I'm working in. And I'm not sure that I've seen too much native out in wild areas. So I think this is one that with experience, you'll get a lot more comfortable, or I hope to get a lot more comfortable with learning about it.
Connie, could you review for each of these 4 photos the most obvious feature that lets us know if it's native or not?
Yeah, we can do that. Number 1 is that it's a narrow leaf. It's not really kind of rounded. And you really can't see much as far as red stems on there. You do see a little bit of red on the new blossoms, but when you're identifying plants, and especially in the firebush, you really want to look at more of the older growth than the new growth. Number 2 is definitely the hair on the back of the leaf. That will tell you every time, not every time, because I have seen hair on the hybridized plants. So I can't say that 100% sure. I think you need a couple different points to figure that out.
So 2 is native, number 1 was non-native.
Correct. Number 3 is native, and mostly because we can tell from the red stems, the red blooms, and you can see on some of the older leaves, that one way in the background, you can see the red stem on the leaf or the red vein on the leaf. So that one, I'm fairly confident that that is a native firebush. And then number 4 is the color of the bloom, gives it away.
That's the non-native.
Correct.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to looking at some natives versus natives. While it would be nice to think identification and confusion only happens between the non-natives, I found that that's not the case at all. And sometimes the natives look alike, and then they also have many different common names, making it difficult to get an accurate identification. Today, I'm only going to look at these 2 species, the partridge pea and the snow square stem. And we'll start with partridge pea. And this ended up being a case of wild versus cultivated native plants. Both of these plants are growing at Sugden, but in different areas. And it has been determined that both of them are Chamichrista fasciculata, or partridge pea. Plant number 1 is growing along the Sugden Trail, and it just started popping up in the last 2 months and has distinctive differences from plant number 2, which was purchased at Cutting Horse and planted in the Sugden Butterfly Garden in July. Plant number 1, the stems, as you can see, are definitely red. The leaves are much more delicate, smaller, and a different shade of green. I got curious because I was hoping out on the trail that I had found sensitive pea, the Chamichrista nicotans, but really not confident about it at all. So I reached out to Andy, and she suggested that we seek out an additional guide for this part of my journey. She then in turn reached out to Dr. George Wilder and made arrangements for us to bring him a specimen. When we walked in, he immediately identified plant number 1 as fasciculata. And after looking at his resources and talking with him, we had to agree that we were not looking at nicotans. And the likely reason for the differences is that one is cultivated and grown under nursery conditions, and the other is growing in the wild. And all of these photos, except for the photo with the caterpillar, are taken from Sugden. The one with the caterpillar was actually taken from Andy's yard. So in looking at some of the characteristics between the sensitive pea or the Chamichrista nicotans and the partridge pea, we can see just a few differences, and the biggest being that the sensitive pea has hairy leaves, and the leaves will fold when touched. And then also they have hairy seed pods. And when we compare that and contrast it with the partridge pea, we see that the leaves are not hairy. The leaves may fold when they're touched, but not necessarily all the time. And their seed pods will be green, turning to red, and are hairless. So now we come to, well, we missed a slide there. Okay, I apologize. We're going to talk now about my favorite plant because I have been continually surprised and delighted by it. I find this plant to be the oddest and most fascinating of tonight's group because the differences are so striking, and I personally needed to understand how I got so confused with this plant. And I'm talking about the Milanther, which is also commonly known as snow square stem and or salt and pepper. There are, we're going to look at two of the varieties. There are three plants in this family. One is the small leaf, which is the parvolio, the large leaf, which is nivea, and there is a third one called augustifolia, which is referred to as narrow leaf or the Everglades snow square stem. And I didn't include that one here as a comparison because I don't have experience nor access to that plant. I got my start with this plant when I chose it for one of the county gardens based on a description and a picture on the web. Plus it was available for the nursery and I just thought, well, I'll give it a try. And I have to say, I didn't think too much of it when I planted it at Sugden. And at a different time, I bought a plant for my own garden. And then one day, Andy was in the county garden at Sugden and mentioned that the snow square stem was in bloom. I did a double take and had really no idea what she was talking about because at home, my plant was in full bloom and clearly identifiable a snow square stem. And that's the plant that you see under the large leaf box, the nivea. As far as I was concerned, the plant that I bought for Sugden had to have been mislabeled because it just did not look like the one I had at home. And so, but, you know, I trusted Andy's observations, and looking at the blossom, it was clearly a snow square stem blossom. And you can see they are very similar. The small leaf one, this one here isn't really featuring the black anthers on it, but on the large leaf, you can see the black anthers very clearly on there. The main differences between these two plants is their height. The parvolio is low to the ground, it's sprawling, it's going to be wider than tall. It grows about 6 to 24 inches. It's a very moderate grower, but it does produce blooms all year long. It just doesn't produce a lot of them. The nivea is a tall, multi-stemmed plant or shrub. It is taller than wider. It's 2 to 4 feet, and I would argue that it can go higher than that, as we will see. And it does need some support. It has a pretty thick trunk, or will grow a pretty thick trunk on it, but it still needs some support. It is a fast grower and blooms all year long. And it is definitely an attractor for pollinators. This last picture here is again from my garden, and I will have butterflies, more than one species at a time on it. And I have bees that regularly visit it also. And now we will revisit the ladies out in the garden and see what they learn about the snow square stem.
Okay. Our last plant that we're going to take a look at is the snow square stem. It's called Melanthra. And Hannah, what you have there is one that I pulled out of the garden to rehabilitate it. And then you have another one here. And I would like for you to kind of take a look at it and see if you can tell the differences between the two.
The same. Yeah, it looks flower-wise.
All right.
The leaf looks a lot different. It's different, yeah. Look, if we put them on the paper, I think it's clear difference in its leaf shape. Wow.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed the size.
Yep.
It's a lot taller.
And that is the biggest difference between the two.
Look at that leaf.
Yeah. Even in your largest leaf on there is nowhere close.
Right, still the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's, comes from their names. You can tell the difference between the two that you had.
Voiceover is for correcting the epithet and the description of the leaves. If you look at the leaf structure and the epithet name, you can distinguish the different plants. This one here is the nieva, which means snow, and white, which references the flower. And then this one here is the smaller one, and parbolio means small leaf. So it is the smaller of the leaves of the two. And then this, the nieva, this one here, will grow the tallest.
The tall one can reach up to 4 to 5 feet. And I would say we even have some here in the garden that are like 6 feet tall.
Yeah,
If we look
pretty
back
big.
there, yeah. And they're right behind your head. I don't know if it's on camera or not. I don't know if you can see.
Is the stem on this, how square that
Mhm.
is. That's amazing. It's very strong stem.
So that's your snow square stem.
It's a little bit of a square here, but
Yeah, it
not
still
all.
kind of is. It's just harder to
Really.
define.
Right, because it's smaller. And this one, yeah, even up here.
Yeah.
It's not quite as square.
Not down here, the stalk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okey-doke.
Interesting. Cool. I had never heard of this plant until you told me about it recently.
Yeah.
And the one in my yard is about 4 feet
Okay.
tall, and it's open for pollinators if you're out there. Come on in.
It's a great for pollinators. I have pictures from my yard where I will have 2 butterflies and bees on it at the same time.
Wow.
It is really a pollinator attractor, and I think every butterfly garden should have one of these in it.
Are they on the same blue?
Yeah, I would say so. 'Cause
Yeah.
this one is just blooming now.
Okay.
This one I know will bloom almost all year round because it's such a big plant. It's got
Wow.
multi-stems,
Yeah.
so I know it'll bloom all year round. This one being so much smaller, there's only what 4 or 5 blossoms on here right now,
Ah.
so I don't think it's going to be a prolific bloomer like the larger one is.
Amazing. Great plant, great garden plant.
You got some excellent close-up photos of the
Yeah.
snow square stem.
Yes, I spend a lot of time photographing it. I get lots of opportunities there. Just to wrap things up here, this was much tougher than I'm expected, and I'm glad for the experience, and I look forward to the next parts of my plant journey. Like many things, the best way to learn is to just get out there and be among as many plants as you can. I encourage you to explore some of our local areas, including the county park gardens and our nature trails. And then Collier County has quite a few local nature trails that you can go out just, for a lunch hour type of walk and enjoy that. This is certainly not the end of the journey for me. I will continue to do some deeper dives into plants, and I've listed a few here that are on my hit list, and that list does keep growing. I just recently added a few more, and I hope to come back with some additional presentations regarding this. And I'm just going to finish here with a quote from Doug Ptolemy's book, Bringing Nature Home. Our success is up to each one of us individually. We can each make a measurable difference almost immediately by planting a native plant nearby. And Andy, thank you for allowing me to, or inviting me to do this presentation. And I welcome any questions or any thoughts anybody might have about plant differences.
Thank
And
you
I
so
hope-
much, Connie. And what a wonderful quote to end on. Very appropriate for Florida Native Plant Month. And we do have some questions in the chat. It might take me a little while to sort through because we have a lot of extra chat activity today, which is awesome. Earlier on in the presentation, when we were talking about firebush, we have a question from Kim. Could you provide some guidance on pruning firebush?
No, I cannot do that. I am very, very lucky. I have one volunteer at our North Collier that is an ex-nurseryman, and he does all our pruning. So, and I don't have Steve here tonight to answer that question, so I don't have an answer. That might be something more in your arena, Andy.
I can touch on that a little bit. The experience that I have pruning the native firebush at the botanical garden, we would do a renewal prune at the beginning of the rainy season. So around mid to late June. And that's if you want to control the size of the firebush. If you don't want it to get too tall, if you want to maintain it at a particular height, then you can prune. You don't want to take away too much of the plant all at once, but we were pruning away at least a third to half of the height on the plant. And when you do a renewal prune, it is important to leave some of the leaves still on the plant so it can continue to photosynthesize, of course. But we time renewal prunes in the rainy season so that the plant doesn't have too much stress at once. It's not going to experience drought stress, at least when you're in the rainy season. It'll just have that pruning stress to contend with. But the rains will fuel the reflush of new leaves and new growth. Okay, that's my presentation on renewal pruning. And we get down to our next question. Becky would like to know, how is the firebush pollinated? And please comment on how the non-native plants spread.
I forgot to mention one of the fun facts on the firebush for pollinators. Actually, the bees have a difficult time with the firebush blossom. So apparently one bee will make a hole at the base of a firebush blossom, and that's how the other bees can get to it, and they take care of pollination that way. The non-native plant spread, as I'm sure if Debbie and Cherry are still on here, we know that very well. The non-native will put out runners from its cut roots. I mean, we have removed the plants entirely, have not removed all of their roots, and we will continue to see new firebush coming up all over the place. So it has been somewhat tricky to get rid of the firebush, the non-native firebush.
Thank you, Connie. All right, so I'm not seeing other questions at this time. There's a lot of thank yous, really informative and helpful, wonderful presentation, illuminating talk. That's a good one. And good to focus on some important plants that can trip us up when they have lookalikes, which is so true. Is there anyone who perhaps doesn't have access to the chat who would like to unmute themselves to ask a question? We got another question in the chat from Zena. Are both of the snow square stems small leaf and large leaf native?
Yes, most definitely there is. And I'm not sure that I have seen a non-native that you could confuse with a snow square stem. I have not seen that yet.
I would agree with you. I've seen the 2 native square stems that you've presented about, and I don't know of a non-native to confuse them with. Good question. Well, if there's any last minute questions, feel free to put them into the chat. But I would like to thank you very much, Connie, for being our presenter during Florida Native Plant Month and to share your journey with us on learning how to distinguish between these native plant lookalikes. And it's been very special to have all of you joining us live for the meeting tonight. And those of you from the Collier County Garden Program, thank you so much for joining our meeting. And you will always be welcome to come to any of the Naples chapter monthly meetings. Love to have you. Anything you'd like to say, Connie, to wrap up tonight?
No, I just want, again, thank you. This has been fun and interesting, and I hope to be able to do a part 2 soon.
Fabulous. We'll look forward to that. And just one more time, happy Florida Native Plant Month, everybody. And I hope to see you at one of the activities we have coming up later this month. The field trip, the native plant sale, or the virtual trivia night at the end of the month. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.